Tim didn't move. Not even a step. His eyes were fixed on the door, as if looking long enough might somehow make everything on the other side disappear. But it didn't. Because Ivo was still there. Right outside. Waiting. Isabel slowly backed away from the door, her breathing uneven. "We need to call someone," she whispered. Tim shook his head immediately. "No." She looked at him, shocked. "No. Tim, he's right outside." "I know," Tim said, his voice low but firm. "But if we call anyone, this gets worse." Another silence. Heavy. Tight. Then. A soft sound. The door handle moved. Just slightly. Isabel gasped quietly, stepping further back. Tim's heart slammed against his chest. Locked. It was locked. But that didn't bring any comfort. Because it meant one thing. Ivo was testing it. "Tim," Ivo's voice came again, calm and almost gentle. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Tim clenched his fists. "Go away," he said loudly. For a moment. There was no response. Then. A quiet chuckle. "You still think you have control," Ivo said. Tim's jaw tightened. Because deep down. He knew that wasn't true. Minutes passed. Or maybe seconds. It was hard to tell. Then suddenly. Silence. Complete silence. Tim slowly stepped forward again. Carefully. Cautiously. He looked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. "He's gone?" Isabel asked softly. Tim didn't answer immediately. Because something didn't feel right. Nothing about this felt right. "He doesn't just leave," Tim said finally. And he was right. Because the moment he stepped away from the door, a loud crash came from inside the room. Isabel screamed. Tim turned instantly. The window. It was open. The curtain moving slightly with the wind. And standing there. Ivo. For a second. Everything froze. Tim couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't even breathe properly. "How?" Isabel started, but her voice broke. Ivo stepped inside slowly. Calm. Controlled. As if this was his space. "You locked the wrong entrance," he said quietly. Tim stepped in front of Isabel immediately. "Stay away from her," he said. Ivo didn't react. He just looked at him. Long. Cold. "I gave you a chance," Ivo said. Tim's pulse was racing now. "You don't understand," Ivo continued. "I tried to make this simple." "This is not simple." Tim snapped. For the first time. Ivo's expression shifted slightly. Not anger. Something darker. Final. "You were never supposed to complicate things," Ivo said. Tim shook his head. "This is over." "No," Ivo replied calmly. "It begins now." Those words sent a chill through the room. Because they didn't sound like a threat anymore. They sounded like a decision. Isabel grabbed Tim's arm. "We need to leave," she whispered urgently. Tim nodded slightly. But there was a problem. Ivo was standing between them. And the only exit. "Move," Tim said. Ivo didn't. "Move," Tim repeated, louder this time. Still nothing. Then Ivo took a step forward. Slow. Deliberate. And suddenly, the distance between them disappeared. "You think running will save you?" Ivo asked quietly. Tim didn't reply. Because this wasn't about talking anymore. It happened fast. Too fast. Tim shoved Ivo. Hard. Not planned. Not controlled. Just instinct. Ivo stumbled back slightly. That was enough. Now! Tim shouted. He grabbed Isabel's hand and rushed toward the door. Unlocked it. Pulled it open. They ran. Footsteps echoed behind them. Fast. Closer. Don't stop. Tim shouted. They ran down the corridor. Past rooms. Past people. Past everything. Tim didn't look back. Because he didn't need to. He could feel it. Ivo was right behind them. They reached the stairs. Took them two at a time. Down. Faster. Isabel almost slipped. Tim caught her. Keep going, he said. The exit was close now. So close. But then. A hand grabbed Tim's shoulder. Hard. Tim realized something truly terrifying. He might not get another chance to escape. Tim's breath stopped the moment Ivo grabbed his shoulder. The grip was strong, unshakable, like iron closing around him. For a split second, everything froze, his thoughts, his body, even the sound of his own heartbeat. Then instinct took over. Tim twisted sharply, trying to break free, his arm jerking forward as he pulled away with all his strength. Ivo's hold loosened just enough. Run! Tim shouted, his voice breaking. Isabel didn't hesitate this time. She ran. Fast. Tim followed, his chest burning, his legs heavy but moving anyway. The hallway seemed longer now, stretching endlessly as panic blurred his vision. Behind them, footsteps. Not rushed. Not chaotic. Controlled. Ivo wasn't chasing wildly. He was certain. That certainty was terrifying. They burst out of the building into the open street. Noise hit them instantly, cars, people, voices, but none of it mattered. Tim grabbed Isabel's hand again and pulled her forward through the crowd. Don't stop, he said, breathless. Isabel nodded, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. They crossed the road without looking, horns blaring as cars swerved past. Where are we going? She asked. Anywhere he's not, Tim replied. But even as he said it, he knew how useless that sounded. They slowed down only when their bodies refused to go further. A narrow street. Quieter. Less crowded. Tim bent forward, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Isabel leaned against the wall, shaking. Is he still behind us? She whispered. Tim turned slowly. Looked back toward the main road. Nothing. No sign of Ivo. No movement. No presence. He's not here, Tim said, but his voice lacked confidence. Because he had learned something now. Not seeing Ivo didn't mean safety. It meant uncertainty. And uncertainty was worse. They found another place to hide, a small cafe tucked between two buildings. Quiet. Almost empty. They went inside, choosing a table near the back, away from the windows. Tim kept his head low. Isabel wrapped her hands around a glass of water, though she didn't drink it. This can't keep happening, she said finally. Tim didn't respond immediately. He was thinking. Hard. Faster than ever before. He won't stop, Tim said quietly. Isabel looked at him. Then what do we do? That question hung in the air. Heavy. Final. Because now, there were only two options. Keep running. Or face him. Tim slowly lifted his head. His eyes had changed. The fear was still there, but something else had appeared alongside it. Determination. We stop him, Tim said. Isabel frowned. How? Tim didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, he didn't fully know yet. But one thing was clear. Running wasn't working. And Ivo wasn't going to let them go. That meant one thing. This wouldn't end unless someone ended it. And for the first time, Tim wasn't just afraid of Ivo. He was thinking like him. Back at the hotel, the broken window still swayed slightly with the wind. The room was empty now. Silent. As if nothing had happened. But something had. Something irreversible. Ivo stood in the shadows across the street, watching the building from a distance. His expression calm. Focused. Unbothered. "They're learning," he murmured to himself. There was no anger in his voice. No frustration. Only patience. Because to him, this was never about chasing. It was about control. And control takes time. Back in the cafe, Tim leaned closer to Isabel. "We need to think carefully," he said. "Every move matters now." Isabel nodded slowly. "I'm scared, Tim." Tim looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, the weight of everything hit him fully. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her safety too. And that changed everything. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said firmly. Isabel didn't reply. But the look in her eyes said everything. She wanted to believe him. But belief wasn't enough anymore. They needed a plan. A real one. Outside, the sky had started to darken again. Evening creeping in slowly. Shadows growing longer. And somewhere in those shadows, Ivo was waiting. Not rushing. Not panicking. Just waiting. Because he knew something Tim was only just beginning to understand. This wasn't a game of speed. It was a game of decisions. And sooner or later, Tim would have to make the biggest one yet. Tim sat still, his mind racing faster than his heartbeat. The noise of the cafe faded into the background as one thought kept repeating itself: running is not enough. He looked at Isabel, who was still shaken but trying to stay composed. This wasn't just fear anymore. This was survival. "We can't keep moving like this," Tim said quietly. "He's always one step ahead." Isabel nodded slowly. "Then we need to disappear." Tim shook his head. "No, not disappear. That's what he expects." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "We need to do something he doesn't expect." Isabel frowned. "Like what?" Tim paused. This was the moment. The shift. The line between reacting and deciding. "We make him come to us," Tim said. Isabel's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "He's already following us," Tim replied. "We just stop running, and choose the place." Silence. Because it sounded crazy. And yet, it made sense. Isabel looked unsure, but she didn't argue. Because deep down, she knew, this couldn't go on forever. "Where?" she asked. Tim thought for a moment. Then said, "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere controlled." An hour later, they left the cafe. This time, slower. More careful. Tim kept scanning reflections in windows, watching movements behind them, thinking differently now. Not like someone being chased, but like someone setting a trap. They found the place just before sunset. An old, quiet area near the edge of the city. Fewer people. Fewer lights. A narrow path leading toward an abandoned building. "This is it?" Isabel asked softly. Tim nodded. "He won't resist coming here." "Why?" Tim looked ahead, his expression serious. "Because this is where things end." They stepped inside. The building was empty. Dusty. Silent. Every sound echoed slightly. Perfect. Tim walked slowly, observing everything. Entrances. Exits. Corners. Shadows. He wasn't guessing anymore. He was preparing. "Stay close to me," he told Isabel. She nodded. They moved deeper inside until they reached a large open space. Broken windows. Fading light. Long shadows stretching across the floor. And then, they waited. Minutes passed. The silence grew heavier. Isabel's breathing was uneven. "What if he doesn't come?" she whispered. Tim didn't look at her. "He will." And just like that. Footsteps. Slow. Echoing. Getting closer. Isabel froze. Tim's jaw tightened. The sound stopped. Then, a figure appeared in the doorway. Ivo. He stepped inside calmly, as if he had been expected. No surprise. No hesitation. Just that same controlled presence. "I was wondering how long it would take," he said quietly. Tim didn't move. "I'm done running." Ivo smiled faintly. "Good." The air between them felt sharp now. Like something invisible was about to snap. "You brought her here," Ivo said, glancing briefly at Isabel. "That was your second mistake." Tim stepped slightly in front of her. "Leave her out of this." Ivo's eyes returned to Tim. "You still don't understand," he said. Tim's voice hardened. "No, now I do." For the first time, there was a shift in control. Small. But real. "You don't scare me anymore," Tim said. It wasn't fully true. But it was enough. Ivo took a slow step forward. "That's where you're wrong," he replied. Another step. Closer. "Fear is the only reason you're still alive," Ivo added softly. Tim didn't step back. "Not this time." "Then maybe it's time I stop being afraid," Tim said. Silence. Heavy. Tense. Isabel watched both of them, her heart pounding. She could feel it, this wasn't just a confrontation. This was the moment everything would change. Ivo stopped walking. "Just a few steps away now." "You think you can win this?" he asked. Tim's eyes didn't leave his. "This isn't about winning," he said. A pause. "It's about ending it." For the first time. Ivo didn't smile. Because something in Tim had changed. Something real. Something dangerous. Outside, darkness had fully settled. Inside, shadows surrounded them. And in that silence, 3 lives stood on the edge of something irreversible. The silence inside the building felt heavier than before. Even the air seemed still, as if it was waiting, just like them. Tim didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Ivo, unblinking now, steady in a way they had never been before. Fear was still there, but it had changed shape. It wasn't controlling him anymore. "You wanted me here," Ivo said calmly, his voice echoing slightly through the empty space. "Now I'm here." Tim nodded once. "Yeah. And what exactly do you think happens next?" Ivo asked. Tim took a slow breath. "It ends." A faint smile touched Ivo's lips, but it didn't last. Because something in Tim's tone didn't sound uncertain anymore. It sounded decided. Isabel stood just behind him, her hands trembling slightly, but she didn't step back. She stayed. That alone made this moment different from everything before. "You're not thinking clearly," Ivo said, taking another step forward. "This isn't something you can just stop." Tim's jaw tightened. "It already stopped the moment I stopped listening to you." That hit. Not loudly. Not visibly. But something shifted in Ivo's expression, just for a second. "Careful," Ivo said quietly. "You're starting to believe your own illusion." Tim didn't respond to that. Instead, he moved slightly to the side. Just enough. Subtle. Almost unnoticeable. But Ivo noticed everything. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You have a plan," he said. It wasn't a question. Tim didn't deny it. For a moment, no one spoke. Just three people, standing in the middle of something that could not be undone. Then Ivo stepped forward again. Faster this time. Closing the distance. "Whatever you think you're doing," Ivo said, his voice lower now, "you're not ready for it." Tim didn't step back. That alone was enough to change the rhythm of the moment. "I don't need to be ready," Tim replied. "I just need to be done." And then, everything happened at once. Ivo moved forward sharply. Tim reacted instantly. He grabbed a broken piece of wood lying nearby and held it up between them. Not to attack, just to stop him from getting closer. "Don't," Tim said. Ivo paused. Looked at the wood. Then at Tim. For a second, nothing happened. Then Ivo smiled again. Slow. Controlled. "You won't use that," he said. Tim didn't lower it. "Try me," he replied. The tension snapped tighter. Isabel's breathing grew louder behind him. She could feel how close this was getting. How fragile everything had become. "Step aside," Ivo said, his eyes shifting briefly toward her. "No," Tim said immediately. That one word carried more weight than anything he had said before. Ivo looked back at him. And this time, there was no softness left at all. "Then you've made your final decision," he said. Tim didn't answer. Because he had. Another step. Closer. Tim tightened his grip on the wood. His heart was racing, but his hands didn't shake anymore. That was new. "Last chance," Ivo said quietly. Tim shook his head. No more chances. And that was it. The moment everything crossed the line. Ivo moved. Fast. Tim reacted. He pushed forward, not attacking, but blocking, forcing distance between them. The wood struck against Ivo's arm, not hard enough to injure, but enough to stop him. For the first time, Ivo stepped back. Just one step. But it was enough. Because now, the balance had shifted. "You see," Tim said, breathing hard. "You're not untouchable." Ivo stared at him. Not angry. Not shocked. Just, calculating. And that was even more dangerous. "Interesting," Ivo said slowly. Because now, this wasn't just control anymore. This was resistance. And resistance changes everything. Isabel stepped slightly closer to Tim. Not in front. Not hiding. Standing with him. That changed something too. 3 people. 3 choices. And only one outcome waiting. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, whistling through the broken windows. The sound echoed inside, mixing with the silence between them. Because now, there was no more talking left. Only action. And whatever happened next would not be undone. The wind howled louder through the broken windows, as if the building itself had come alive to witness what was about to happen. Dust moved across the floor in thin lines, swirling around their feet. Tim stood firm, gripping the broken wood, his eyes locked on Ivo. There was no hesitation left now. Only decision. Ivo tilted his head slightly, studying him. "This is new," he said quietly. "You've changed." Tim didn't reply. Because this wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about ending it. "People don't change this quickly," Ivo continued, taking a slow step sideways, circling slightly. "Not without breaking first." Tim's grip tightened. "Maybe I already did." A pause. Then Ivo smiled faintly. "Yes. I think you did." That smile carried something deeper now, not control, not confidence, but interest. As if this had become something more than just a situation. Something personal. Isabel stayed close, her eyes moving between them, her breathing still uneven but quieter now. She wasn't frozen anymore. She was watching. Understanding. "Stay behind me," Tim said softly without looking back. "I'm not leaving you alone," Isabel replied. Tim didn't argue. There was no time. Ivo stepped forward again. Slower this time. Careful. Calculated. "You think standing together changes the outcome?" he asked. Tim answered immediately. "Yes." Another step. The distance between them grew smaller again, but this time. Tim didn't wait. He moved first. A quick step forward, lifting the wood, not to strike hard, but to force space, to control movement. It pushed Ivo back slightly again, breaking his advance. That moment mattered. Because now, Tim wasn't reacting. He was leading. Ivo noticed. Of course he did. "You're learning," he said quietly. Tim's voice was sharper now. "No. I'm done learning." Silence fell again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt like the edge of something. Like a breaking point. Ivo's expression slowly changed. Not dramatic. Just, colder. More focused. "Then this ends now," he said. And this time. He moved faster. No pause. No warning. He lunged forward, grabbing the wood and twisting it sharply. Tim struggled to hold it, their hands locked for a second, tension running through both of them. Isabel gasped. Tim pushed back hard, forcing the wood free again, stumbling one step but not falling. Breathing heavier now. Closer. Too close. "This is what you wanted," Ivo said quietly, his voice steady even now. Tim shook his head. "No, this is what you forced." For the first time. A flicker of something crossed Ivo's face. Not anger. Not fear. Something sharper. Something like resistance to losing control. That flicker was small. But Tim saw it. And that was enough. Because now he understood something clearly. Ivo wasn't invincible. He just believed he was. And belief can break. Tim took a slow step forward. This time, Ivo didn't move immediately. For a brief moment, they stood equal. No control. No advantage. Just two choices waiting to happen. Isabel looked around quickly, her eyes landing on something nearby, a metal rod lying close to the wall. She hesitated for only a second, then moved. Quietly. Carefully. Tim didn't notice. But Ivo did. His eyes shifted for just a fraction of a second. That was enough. Tim stepped in closer, using that distraction. "Look at me," Tim said firmly. Ivo's gaze snapped back. Too late. The balance had already shifted again. Behind him, Isabel picked up the rod, her hands shaking but determined now. She didn't rush forward. She didn't panic. She waited. The right moment. Back in front, Tim lowered the wood slightly, but didn't drop it. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," he said. And this time. It was true. Ivo studied him. Long. Silent. And for the first time. There was no immediate response. Because something had changed. Not just in Tim. But in the situation itself. The control Ivo had held from the beginning. Was slipping. Slowly. But surely. And he could feel it. Outside, the wind grew stronger, rattling the broken glass. Inside, the tension reached its highest point yet. Because now. This wasn't about fear. This wasn't about running. This wasn't even about survival anymore. This was about ending something that should never have begun. And the next move would decide who walks away. For a brief second, everything stood still. The wind, the shadows, even the tension in the air felt frozen between them. Tim could hear his own heartbeat, steady now, not racing like before. That alone told him something had changed. He wasn't reacting anymore. He was choosing. Ivo watched him carefully, his eyes sharper than ever. "You think this is control?" he asked quietly. Tim didn't answer immediately. He took a slow breath, then said, "No, this is the end." Those words didn't echo. They settled. Heavy. Final. Behind Ivo, Isabel tightened her grip on the metal rod. Her hands were still shaking, but her eyes weren't. She was focused now. Waiting for the right moment. She understood something clearly: if Tim hesitated, everything would fall apart. Ivo took one slow step forward. "You keep saying that," he said. "But you don't understand what it takes to end something like this." Tim's voice didn't break. "I do now." Another step. Closer. Too close again. But this time, Tim didn't move back. That small difference changed everything. Ivo noticed it. Of course he did. His expression shifted slightly, less confident, more alert. Because now, Tim wasn't following the pattern anymore. "You've come this far," Ivo said softly. "Don't ruin it by pretending you're something you're not." Tim's eyes hardened. "And what is that?" Ivo leaned slightly closer. "Someone who can't finish what he starts." That hit. Harder than anything before. Because for a split second, doubt returned. A small crack. Barely visible. But real. And Ivo saw it. He moved instantly. Fast. Closing the distance completely. His hand shot forward, grabbing Tim's collar, pulling him closer. "See?" Ivo whispered. "Still the same." But before Tim could react, a sharp sound cut through the silence. Metal against something solid. Ivo froze, his grip loosened slightly. His expression changed. For the first time. Real surprise. Slowly, he turned his head. Behind him, Isabel stood there, the metal rod in her hands. Her breathing heavy. She had struck him. Not hard enough to knock him down. But enough to break the moment. Enough to shift everything. Tim pulled free instantly, stepping back. Ivo stumbled slightly, catching his balance, his hand brushing against the side where he had been hit. Silence fell again. But this silence was different. Because now, the control was broken. Completely. "You should have left," Ivo said quietly, his voice lower now. Not calm. Not controlled. Something else. Something dangerous. Tim stepped forward again. "No," he said. "You should have." For the first time. Ivo didn't respond immediately. Because now he was recalculating. Adapting. But something had changed. The certainty he carried before, was gone. In its place. Uncertainty. And that made him unpredictable. Isabel stepped closer to Tim, still holding the rod. Not hiding anymore. Standing beside him. Together. That mattered. "You think this ends here?" Ivo said finally. Tim didn't hesitate this time. Yes. The answer came without fear. Without doubt. Just truth. And that was something Ivo wasn't used to facing. Another long pause. The wind pushed through the broken windows again, louder now, filling the empty space around them. Ivo looked at both of them. Carefully. Measuring something. Then, slowly. He stepped back. One step. Then another. Not running. Not defeated. But, retreating. For now. Tim didn't move. Didn't chase. Didn't speak. Because he understood something important. This wasn't about forcing an ending. It was about holding it. Ivo stopped near the doorway. Looked at them one last time. And said quietly, "This isn't over." Then he turned. And walked away. Just like that. Gone into the darkness. The sound of his footsteps faded slowly, until there was nothing left but silence. Real silence this time. Tim stood there, unmoving. His chest rising and falling slowly. Trying to understand what had just happened. Beside him, Isabel lowered the rod slightly, her hands still trembling. "Is it over?" she asked softly. Tim didn't answer right away. Because he wasn't sure. Not yet. But one thing was clear. Something had changed. Something important. They weren't running anymore. And Ivo wasn't in control anymore. Tim finally looked at her. And said quietly, "It's close." Outside, the night had fully taken over. Dark. Silent. Endless. And somewhere within that darkness, the final piece of the story was still waiting. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like something had finally been broken, something that had been holding everything together in the worst possible way. Tim stood still for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the doorway where Ivo had disappeared. His body was exhausted, but his mind was finally clear. Isabel slowly lowered the metal rod completely, her hands still shaking slightly. "Is it really over?" she asked again, her voice softer this time. Tim took a deep breath. The kind of breath that comes after surviving something you weren't sure you would. "No," he said quietly. "Not yet." Isabel's heart sank slightly at that answer, but she didn't argue. Because deep down, she understood. People like Ivo don't just disappear. They wait. They return. "We can't stay here," Tim said, looking around the empty building. Isabel nodded. "Then where do we go?" Tim didn't answer immediately. Because for the first time, running didn't feel like the right choice. He said, "It's not over," Isabel added, her voice tense. "What if he comes back?" Tim looked toward the doorway again. "He will," he said. A pause. Then he added, "But this time, we'll be ready." They stepped outside together. The night air felt colder now. Quieter. Almost too quiet. The streets around the building were nearly empty, the city distant in the background like a different world entirely. For a moment, everything seemed still. Safe. But Tim knew better. They began walking slowly, not rushing this time. Not panicking. Just moving forward. Each step felt different. Heavier, but stronger. "You've changed," Isabel said after a while. Tim glanced at her. "I had to." She nodded. Because she had seen it too. The fear that once controlled him, had turned into something else. Something sharper. Something steady. They reached the main road. Lights. Cars. People. Life moving normally again. It felt strange, almost unreal after everything that had just happened. "Let's go somewhere public," Isabel said. Tim agreed. More people meant less risk. At least for now. They entered a small late-night diner. Bright lights. A few people sitting quietly. Nothing unusual. Nothing threatening. They sat down in a corner booth. For the first time in hours, no one was watching. Or so it seemed. Tim stared at the table for a moment, lost in thought. Then he looked up. "We need to end this properly," he said. Isabel frowned. "What do you mean?" Tim's expression hardened slightly. I mean, we can't just wait for him to come back. We have to make sure he doesn't. That sentence carried weight. Because now, Tim wasn't thinking about escaping anymore. He was thinking about finality. Isabel hesitated. Tim, what are you saying? He looked at her directly. I'm saying this only ends one way. Silence. Because they both understood what that meant. Even if neither of them wanted to say it out loud. Before Isabel could respond, the bell above the diner door rang softly. Tim's head snapped up instantly. His body tensed. Someone had entered. Slow footsteps. Calm. Familiar. Tim didn't need to turn to know. But he did anyway. And there he was. Ivo. Standing near the entrance, his eyes scanning the room, until they landed on Tim. No surprise. No hesitation. Just that same quiet certainty. He found us, Isabel whispered. Tim didn't reply. Because this time, something was different. He wasn't afraid. Ivo began walking toward them. Slowly. Each step measured. The people around them didn't notice anything unusual. To them, this was just another moment. Another night. But for Tim, this was the final moment. Ivo stopped at their table. Looked at both of them. Then said quietly, I told you, this isn't over. Tim stood up slowly. His eyes steady. His voice calm. No, he said. A pause. Then he added. It ends now. Something in his tone changed the air between them. For the first time, Ivo didn't respond immediately. Because he saw it. The fear was gone. Completely gone. And in its place was something far more dangerous. Decision. Tim stepped forward slightly. Not aggressive. Not loud. But final. You don't control this anymore, he said. Ivo stared at him. Long. Silent. Then slowly. He smiled. But this time, it wasn't the same smile. It wasn't confident. It wasn't certain. It was uncertain. And that meant one thing. He knew. He had lost control. A long silence passed between them. Then finally, Ivo stepped back. One step. Then another. No words this time. No threats. Just a quiet retreat. He turned. And walked out of the diner. Gone. This time. For real. Tim stood there, unmoving. Waiting. Listening. But nothing came. No footsteps. No return. Just silence. Isabel stood beside him. Is it over? She asked one last time. Tim looked toward the door. Then back at her. And for the first time, he allowed himself to breathe. Yes, he said quietly. It's over. Outside, the night continued as if nothing had happened. Cars passed. Lights flickered. People moved on with their lives. But for Tim, everything had changed. Because some nights don't end when the sun rises. They end when you finally face what you were running from. And this time, Tim didn't run.